Well, hello, and welcome back to the boat. This afternoon I'm working on this here Edson pedestal, steering pedestal here, and I had another one I was robbing parts from to kind of rebuild this thing. This pedestal is pretty worn, but I wanted to keep the base. This base is newer than the one I've got. The one I've got is a really old style, and it's kind of clunky and bulky, but most of the parts are interchangeable. So I'm going to change out the brake assembly and the bearings and probably the sprocket, maybe even the shaft, although this shaft is probably fine. But I'm going to just rebuild it from parts from the other one. Here is the shaft and the needle bearings and the gear and everything from the other one. And this one still got the knurled area there where the brake locks, the locking brake goes. And on the old shaft, I'll see if I can't get it to show up on my phone here. You can see right down in there, it's pretty slick. Whereas on this one, it's still got the knurls on it there that the brake clamps onto, and I'm sure the brake pads are probably worn out on it too, or at least getting hard and brittle. But what I've got to do is take this off, and then I've got to take a cotter key out right here, and then unscrew this brake handle here, and take out these brake arms here. And then there is a pin. Right there is a pin that has to be driven out, and it's a tapered pin, so you have to make sure that you figure out which side is the smaller side, and there's not much difference in them, so you have to really look close. But the side that's the smaller side, you knock it backwards the other direction, and that pin comes out, and then the shaft will come out, and then you've got needle bearings in here and needle bearings in here that have to be greased, and in my case I may replace them with these other ones. But I'm wanting to keep this housing, and this pedestal stand, because it just fits better in the boat, and it's got the compass on it's different and all that. So anyway, using two to make one. So the first thing you do, you just gotta get down in here with some needle nose or something and pull this cotter pin or cotter key out of the shaft. It's kind of way down in there, so it's a little bit hard to get to. Okay, so if you can see that, the ends of it where you bend it, flare it out to keep it from coming out, they were completely broken off, so that was just in there from friction only. It could have fallen out any time. So there's that. So that'll need to be replaced. All right, and then the next thing is to take off this. This is just a little capturing device that captures those little brake arms to keep them in line with the knurled part of the shaft. So this comes off. I'm gonna go get me a container to put this stuff in so I won't lose anything. Okay, just an old ice cream bucket. They work good for stuff like this. And there's all kind of videos on YouTube. Edson has a series of videos on how to take these things apart. If you've got one to do, I would suggest checking those out. Now I can already see that there's something missing. There's supposed to be a little brass washer that goes on those, and there's not. But that's okay. And anyway, once you get that off, Then you just unscrew this brake handle, and this the port side brake arm is threaded, so it'll eventually come loose whenever you keep unscrewing this thing. Okay, so the brake pads are not worn out, but they're kind of dirty and oily. You wouldn't normally have oil on those, but that one does. Somebody probably sprayed lubricant down in there and sprayed it all over the brake assembly as well as everything else, and so you got the brakes oily. So I've got some better ones, so I'll probably put the better ones in. And then you just keep unscrewing this thing here. In my case, I've got access to the underside of this down in at the bilge. So if I do lose something down in there, I can retrieve it. But if you were doing this and the engine was in and all that, and you couldn't easily get back to things, it's a good idea to try to capture it in some form or fashion where you can get your pieces back. So anyway, you use a punch or a bolt or whatever you've got to punch that pin out. And if you catch it at the right point, you can spin the shaft over and grab it with a pair of pliers. You may be able to see there where it's starting to come out there now. And it's tapered, but it's just barely tapered. Now I just knocked it loose until I felt it get kind of slack. And then I'm going to spin it over and just take a pair of vice grips and see if I can work it out. There. Right there's the pin. And at a quick glance, you don't realize it's tapered. But it is. And you can just barely tell that it's tapered. And it's just a drive-in fit. And you may be able to see there now that bronze knurled area where the brake engages right there. It is completely worn, totally smooth. There's no knurls left on it at all. So that's worn out. All right, so now that I got that pin out, I have to line up. There's a V right here. There's a little V stamped into it, like in the point of the V lines up where the keyway is, the shaft key, and there's another shaft key inside this bronze housing. But the problem is there's there's rings, bushings right here, and you have to align the bushing with that V, because there's also a keyway cut out in that. And you're not going to be able to see it, but there's, in these two spacer bushings right here, there's a little notch in them where you can take a screwdriver and move them back and forth to line them up. And that has to line up with that V that's stamped into the metal. And then that is where that shaft key is at, where everything aligns. I think I'm right on this. Yeah. There you go. So you got to get everything aligned just right for it to come out. And if you get everything aligned just right and wiggle it around a little bit, it will come out. Okay. So you can see these little spacers, how they're notched for that shaft key right here, and then they've got a little V above it. And that has to line up so that they can slide off of that shaft. They have to line up so it slides across them like that. And that is a point that's easy to miss. So that goes on there. And then there's one of the roller bearings. Like I say, that roller bearing is actually probably okay. It just needs some fresh grease on it. But it's a bit worn. And then those are the ones at the back. So this one has one spacer at the back, I believe. There's the other bearing. This bearing here is a bit boogered up. The housing itself appears to be a bit boogered up. Well, maybe not. It's just full of oil and crud. But I think I've got some bearings that are better I'm going to put back in it after I clean it up really good. I'm going to get me some brake cleaner or something like that and just clean everything up really, really good, and then put a waterproof grease back in. I think they recommend a Teflon grease or something like that. I'm going to have to take a little tiny drill bit or something and open up that little oiling hole right there. It is clogged completely with something, dirt or old hard grease or something. I'm just keep an old bucket around to throw my dirty rags and stuff in, dirty paper towels and stuff in, trying to keep some of that crud off the boat itself as much as possible. Sometimes you get oil and stuff all over the fiberglass and it's a little bit aggravating. Get it cleaned up, get it off. You know, on second thought, I think I won't use brake cleaner because I'm pretty sure that's going to take the paint off. I think I'll maybe just use some, maybe a light acetone on a rag or something like that and clean it up a little bit. That'll break that oil up too, and maybe not take off the paint. These pedestals don't usually get any rainwater or anything like that inside them from the top side, but you have to remember they are open from the bottom, and so you'll get dust and mess in it from the bottom side, and also just from the chain wearing out and the cables in there moving around. Things wear out and you get metal dust off of the stuff wearing out and that kind of thing. So eventually you're going to get some crud in these things. I'm just using PB Blaster to clean it up. That's working just fine. I've got it pretty nice and shiny on the inside already. As I'm planning on replacing that brake assembly with this one, which is identical off of that other piece. Just clean it up a bit. Okay, so that's the one I'm going to put back in there. It's got better brake pads. They're dry. Everything about that one is just better. So that's going to be that. Now, as far as the shaft and bearings, I'm going to reuse my my other shaft. Make sure everything about it is the same. It should be. They should be interchangeable. Everything looks the same. Clean everything up. That one does have an O-ring on it already in place, and that O-ring just seals in that opening right there to keep rainwater out. Okay. We'll just use a little bit of acetone to clean off the old grease off everything, old dried out grease. You actually can take these bearings apart, individual rollers out of them. You can snap them out to really give them a good thorough cleaning, and then snap them back in. Like I say, the housing is like made out of something like Delrin, I think, which is, I guess you could say it's similar to nylon, but stronger. Put this up here in the sunshine, let it evaporate off of it. And what I'm going to go get my split ring pliers, and I'm going to pull that bearing off of that shaft right there, because there's some grit and dirt down in underneath that bearing that I need to clean out. So I'll be back in a minute. Now I'm just using some waterproof grease. Now you can grease these after they're installed too, but I like to grease them good before I put them in. I don't like to put them in dry. Put that back bearing back in first. Okay, now I got to clean up this sprocket. Edson sells some lubricant for this stuff, and also for the chain, but then they also recommend, like for example on the chain, they just recommend that you oil it with some 30-weight oil. The main thing is that it's got some kind of lubrication, and that, you know, every couple of years at least, that you pop it open and lubricate it again with these bearings and stuff. They're important. Okay. So that's clean enough. Now, one thing that I like to do to make disassembly easier in the future, anytime I'm messing with stainless steel or aluminum, or stainless and aluminum mix, or stainless to brass or bronze, I usually put a little bit of lanolin grease on parts that need to be disassembled later. It acts as a bit of a never seize type of a thing, as well as a bit of lubricant, and it is 100% waterproof, and it's cheap, and it does not dry out. It lasts like forever and a day. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna just take just a little bit of this lanolin. Now this is cold. It's been in the boat, and it was down in the 20s last night, so it's a bit cold. But like I say, a jar of this stuff lasts forever. Does not go bad. Lasts decades, whatever. It does not go bad. But there you go. Okay, so then this. Now I got to make sure I've got everything set up properly. So I need my shims. Rinse these off just a little bit. They're a little bit dirty and greasy. Again, there's a, maybe I'll see it, there's a V right there stamped in it. The point of that V is what you're lining up with the keyway. Okay, so far so good. Now, I've still got to get this back bushing in, spacer, whatever you want to call it, and it's a little bit tricky. You got to pull everything back out until there's the opening, and then without dropping it. All right, there you go. Alright, so now what I've got to do is drive that pin through. And like I say, the pin is tapered, and you can't hardly tell which side is which, just glancing at it. Okay, if you look really carefully at this pin, you can see that there's some cut grooves in it, which are kind of like locking grooves. And those cut grooves don't go quite to the end. Pretty sure where the grooves don't go all the way to the end is the small end. Yeah. And then you just drive that in. Just like that. Alright, so now she's locked in. So now that's super smooth. Super smooth. Before it would barely even turn. As a matter of fact, whenever I first took the wheel off and took the chain and everything off, I could not turn that shaft right there by hand at all. I had to put the wheel on it to get enough leverage to even be able to turn it. And now it's like super smooth. And this thing does not have grease zerks on it, or whatever you call those things. It's just got holes. But I'm going to just force a bit of waterproof grease down in there, and that let me see a little bit of, just a little bit of grease come out on that that little spacer washer, bushing washer. Don't want much coming out because it'll end up getting on your brake assembly. Now, before I put my wheel back on, I will put that lanolin grease on that shaft there as well. If you watched an earlier episode, whenever I took this thing apart, I had to use a wheel puller to get the helm or the steering wheel off. It was extremely difficult to get off. It had corrosion had set up between the shaft and the hub of the wheel, and a little bit of that lanolin or Tef gel. If you've got that, that's even better. But the lanolin is good enough. Like I say, it works really good on stainless and aluminum. And what I'm using here is just a little like a 3M Scotch-Brite pad, except for it's made for stainless. And this is a super fine, so it doesn't remove any material. It really is just, it just kind of polishes. And then just take my lanolin. Okay. And since now it just slides on and off like super easy. And now it steers super easy. When you put the brake assembly in, remember that this washer here, the spacer washer, has to go on once that goes through before that first arm goes on. And it's a little bit tricky to get it on without dropping anything. And I don't normally grease these threads simply because I don't want grease on the brake assembly. But if you're careful, you can drop it in there with your finger like that right there and get it in. It's just enough room. Now, the one that's got the oversized hole goes on next. Okay, now, and this one goes on. This is the one that's threaded. Hold it until the threads start, and then you're good to go. And then turn it up a little bit. Now, I try to put that key in before I put that plate on top. It gives me just a tiny bit more room. And so what I do, I just hold those brake arms in place and just barely tension that like that right there. Now I really need a brass cotter key for this, although stainless is okay. The brass is easier to get out in the future. I'll go look in my boat and see what I've got, see if I've got one. If not, I'll put a stainless one in it. And that's just so you won't turn that thing all the way out and lose that arm down inside there. Well, I don't have a brass or a stainless in the boat, so I'm going to have to go to my shop and look and try to find one. But let me show you here in case I forget. When you reinstall this when you reinstall this keeper, I guess you could call it, over those brakes, you really need to use a nylon spacer washer under it, because you don't want that stainless plate screwed directly down to that aluminum, just because of corrosion issues. So it's a good idea to use that little spacer. There was not one on here, and you could see where corrosion had started just a touch there, galvanic corrosion. So I will be putting it back with the little nylon washers under it. It still works the same. It just gives you a little bit of protection there from corrosion. That's all it's about. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some of that lanolin grease on the threads of these stainless bolts to, again, help with galvanic corrosion, because I've got stainless steel screws going into an aluminum housing, and these housings are really expensive if you have to buy a new one. So like I say, this just acts as like a never sees, and it's waterproof and it's cheap. So between the nylon washers, spacers, and that lanolin, hopefully that'll end that corrosion that was starting to form there. And the next time it's taken apart for maintenance, everything should come apart, you know, relatively easy. Okay, so there you go. There's your brakes work now. I've just got to get me a pin, a little cotter pin, and then I'll be ready to drop my chain through and start reassembling everything down inside the boat and out here. But no, that's rebuilt. Now it's rebuilt with secondhand parts, but it was secondhand parts that were still in good shape, good condition, not cruddy and worn out and corroded, you know, like some of the parts were that I took out. So yeah, so we're good. All right, I'm gonna go to the shop and get me a cotter key.